It was supposed to be my final day at Crescendo Innovations. I sat alone at the far end of the long glass conference table, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched the folder containing 8 months of my life's work. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Austin skyline, morning light spilled across the polished surface, illuminating the faces of executives who wouldn't meet my eyes. The air conditioning hummed too loudly in the silence. As you can see, Project Echo represents a significant breakthrough in adaptive interface technology. Derek Ellison, my soon-to-be former boss, gestured confidently at the presentation screen. My team has developed an AI tool that will revolutionize how nonverbal individuals interact with technology. My team, my project, words that sliced through me with surgical precision. I watched him take credit for every line of code I had written, every problem I had solved, every breakthrough I had achieved while working nights and weekends. His perfectly tailored suit and practiced smile contrasted sharply with my lavender sweater and dark circles under my eyes, the uniform of someone who had actually built the thing being presented. The potential market applications are extensive, Derek continued, flashing his trademark smile that had charmed investors and intimidated subordinates for years. Healthcare, education, assisted living facilities. We're looking at multiple revenue streams within the first year alone. I knew this pitch by heart. I had written it. 8 months ago, I had pitched Project Echo to Derek with trembling hands and a racing heart. I explained how my younger brother Thomas, who is autistic and nonverbal, inspired me to create an interface that could interpret micro-expressions and subtle gestures, translating them into actionable commands. The technology could help thousands of people like Thomas communicate more effectively with the world around them. Derek had seemed genuinely impressed. "This has potential, Madeline," he'd said, actually using my first name for once. "Let's give it a shot." That moment of validation had meant everything to me. I'd called my mom that night, barely containing my excitement. "They're letting me build it, Mom. They're actually letting me build it." Now I sat silently as Derek fielded questions from the board, using my research, my solutions, my passion, all while referring to me as part of the team restructuring that would happen after today's launch. The technical term for what was happening was intellectual theft. The human term was betrayal. 2 weeks ago, I'd found my access to the project servers restricted. Then mysterious meetings appeared on calendars I wasn't invited to. Documents I'd created were suddenly being modified under Derek's credentials. When I confronted him, he'd offered a tight smile and said, "Let's discuss your concerns after the launch, Madeline. We're all under pressure right now." Yesterday, HR had called me in. A woman I'd never met before pushed a severance package across the desk. "We're going in a different direction with the Echo team," she'd explained without meeting my eyes. "Your position will be eliminated effective tomorrow afternoon." I hadn't signed it. I couldn't. Not until I saw how far Derek would go. Now I knew. All the way to the boardroom, with my project presented as his brainchild. "Any questions?" Derek asked, scanning the room with confident ease. "Yes," said Charles Winthrop, the CFO. "What safeguards have you built to protect user privacy? These are vulnerable populations we'd be working with." Derek hesitated for just a fraction of a second, enough for me to recognize he didn't know the answer. It was a question I had obsessed over for months, building multiple security layers and consent protocols specifically for vulnerable users. "Actually," I said, my voice breaking the silence, "the system utilizes a triple encryption protocol with user-controlled privacy. Settings." All eyes turned to me. Derek's smile faltered. "The data never leaves the user's device without explicit consent," I continued, finding strength in the technical details I knew intimately. "We've implemented a visual consent system that doesn't require verbal confirmation, making it accessible even to those with significant communication barriers." Charles nodded appreciatively. "Impressive." Derek quickly regained his composure. "Yes, exactly as Madeline said. Her team handled those particular details under my direction." Her team. I was a team of one. "Well," said Margaret Chen, the CEO, closing her tablet case, "it seems Crescendo is once again at the forefront of inclusive technology. Congratulations, Derek. The board approves moving forward with the launch this afternoon." Approving nods circled the table. I felt my future slipping away with each one. "Thank you all," Derek said. "If there's nothing else, I should get back to final preparations." "Actually," Margaret said, "I'd like a moment with just the senior staff. Derek, you can stay. Everyone else will reconvene at the launch event." That was my dismissal. I gathered my notes and stood on unsteady legs. Nobody looked at me as I walked toward the door. Nobody except Derek, whose eyes held a warning, "Don't make a scene. Go quietly." I had almost reached the door when it swung open. A young woman stood in the doorway, mid-20s, sharp blazer, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, quiet confidence radiating from her poised stance. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for Madeline Blake." "That's me," I said, confusion momentarily replacing my heartbreak. "I'm Ava Delaney," she said, extending her hand. "I believe you met my grandfather yesterday." "Frank Delaney?" The name didn't register immediately. Then I remembered. The elderly man near the elevators, struggling to breathe, disoriented. I had stayed with him until help arrived. "Is he all right?" I asked, genuine concern pushing aside my own troubles. "He is, thanks to you," she said with a warm smile. "May I speak with you privately? It's rather important." Before I could respond, Derek stepped forward. "I'm afraid Ms. Blake is needed for launch preparations. Perhaps you could schedule something through my assistant for later this week?" Ava's gaze shifted to Derek, her expression cooling noticeably. "Actually, Mr. Ellison, what I have to discuss with Ms. Blake concerns you as well. And the board." She pulled an official-looking folder from her briefcase. "It's regarding Project Echo and its rightful authorship." The room went completely still. "I'm sorry," Margaret said, rising from her chair. "Who exactly are you?" Ava straightened to her full height. "I'm Ava Delaney, corporate counsel representing Frank Delaney, the founder of Crescendo Innovations. And I have evidence of intellectual property theft that the board should find very concerning." In that moment, as everyone's expressions shifted from confusion to alarm, I realized my simple act of kindness toward an elderly man in distress had somehow become a lifeline I never expected. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. 24 hours earlier, I had been working late again. The office floor was mostly empty, with just a few determined souls hunched over their monitors, fighting deadlines or ambition, or both. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across empty desks and darkened conference rooms. I was reviewing the final code for Project Echo before submitting it to the development server, a server I suspected I might lose access to at any moment. The past 2 weeks had been a slow-motion nightmare as I watched my project being systematically stolen from me, piece by piece. Each morning brought new adjustments to the workflow, new restrictions to my access, new meetings I wasn't invited to attend. I needed to print some technical documentation, so I gathered my notes and headed toward the printer room near the elevators. The hallway was dimly lit, with motion sensors that flickered to life as I walked past empty offices. That's when I saw him. An elderly man slumped against the wall near the 7th-floor elevator bank. He was dressed in an expensive but slightly rumpled suit, his silver hair disheveled, his face ashen. No badge, no phone, just visible distress in his eyes. I rushed over immediately. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside him. He tried to speak, but only managed a wheezing sound, his hand clutching at his chest. His eyes were wide with panic. "It's going to be all right," I assured him, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "I'm going to help you." I helped him into a sitting position against the wall, then pulled out my phone to call the building's emergency services. While waiting for them to answer, I loosened his tie and collar button. "Try to take slow, deep breaths," I said, demonstrating the rhythm. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." He nodded slightly, attempting to follow my lead. "My name is Madeline," I said, trying to keep him focused. "Can you tell me your name?" He managed to whisper, "Frank." "Okay, Frank. Help is on the way. Is there someone I should call for you?" He shook his head slightly, still struggling to breathe. When the building nurse finally arrived, I stayed with Frank, holding his hand while his vitals were checked. I made awkward jokes about the terrible coffee in the break room and how the elevator music always seemed to be stuck in the 1980s. Small, silly things to distract him from his fear. Gradually, his breathing eased. Color returned to his face. "Panic attack," the nurse explained. "With his history of mild heart issues, the symptoms can be frightening and similar to a cardiac event." Frank nodded, seeming embarrassed. "I got disoriented," he explained between breaths. "Couldn't remember which floor." Then the panic started. "Are you visiting someone in the building?" I asked gently. A strange expression crossed his face, something between amusement and sadness. "You could say that," he replied. The nurse suggested calling a family member to take him home. Frank reluctantly agreed, asking to use my phone. He dialed a number from memory. "Ava," he said when someone she answered. It's happened again. 7th floor at Crescendo. Yes, I'm fine. There's a kind young woman here named Madeline who helped me. No, don't rush. I'm okay now. After he hung up, Frank turned to me. My granddaughter, he explained, worries too much. That's what family does, I said with a smile. Do you work here? He asked, his breathing steadier now. Yes, in AI development. I'm working on an adaptive interface project. His eyebrows rose slightly. What's it called? Project Echo. It helps nonverbal individuals interact more naturally with technology. I surprised myself by adding, my brother is autistic. He inspired the whole thing. Frank's expression softened. That sounds remarkable. You must be very dedicated to your work. I am, I said, a wave of sadness washing over me as I remembered my impending dismissal. Or at least I was. Frank studied my face carefully. Trouble at work? I hesitated, uncertain how much to share with a stranger. But there was something trustworthy about his weathered face and kind eyes. Let's just say office politics can be complicated. Ah, he nodded knowingly. Corporate sharks circling? Something like that, I admitted. We sat in companionable silence until the elevator dinged. A security guard stepped out, followed by a striking woman in her mid-20s with the same blue eyes as Frank. Grandpa, she said, rushing to his side, you promised to call before visiting the office. And miss all this excitement? He joked weakly. The woman, Ava, I presumed, turned to me with genuine gratitude. Thank you for staying with him. He's supposed to be resting at home, not wandering around office buildings. It was no trouble, I assured her. Anyone would have done the same. Frank made a skeptical noise. 3 people walked past before you stopped, young lady. Don't sell yourself short. I helped them gather Frank's things, a hat, a walking stick I hadn't noticed before. As they prepared to leave, Frank turned to me. Madeline, was it? He asked. I nodded. Which department did you say you work in? AI development, 7th floor. And your last name? Blake. Madeline Blake. He nodded thoughtfully. Well, Ms. Blake, thank you for your kindness. It means more than you know. Take care of yourself, Frank, I said, watching as Ava helped him into the elevator. Just before the doors closed, Frank looked directly at me and said something that struck me as odd at the time. Sometimes the smallest gesture reveals a person's true character. I stood there for a moment, puzzled by his words and the intensity of his gaze. Then I shook it off and returned to my desk, forgetting about the encounter as I immersed myself back in work. I stayed until nearly midnight, downloading backups of my code, documentation, and design notes, evidence of my authorship that I knew might be my only leverage if I decided to fight back. I didn't know if I had the energy for a legal battle against a company like Crescendo, but I couldn't bear the thought of surrendering everything I'd built without at least preserving proof that it was mine. When I finally left, the building was nearly empty. The night? Security guard nodded as I passed his desk. Working late again, Ms. Blake? Last time, I said with a sad smile. Moving on to better things? He asked kindly. I paused, considering his question. I hope so, Roy. I really hope so. The ride home was a blur of streetlights and quiet desperation. My apartment felt empty and cold when I arrived, despite the summer heat outside. I dropped my bag by the door and collapsed onto my couch without even turning on the lights. Tomorrow would be my last day at Crescendo Innovations. Derek would present my project as his own. I would be escorted out with a box of personal items and a severance package that bought my silence. 8 months of work, countless late nights, and a genuine desire to help people like my brother, all of it stolen in plain sight. I closed my eyes, too exhausted even for tears. What I didn't know then, as I drifted into troubled sleep, was that I had unknowingly set in motion a series of events that would change everything. My simple act of kindness in a hallway was about to return to me in ways I never could have imagined. Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales when you least expect it. The conference room felt like it was spinning around me. Ava Delaney stood confidently by the door, her presence transforming the energy of the room in an instant. I watched as the board members exchanged confused glances, their polite corporate masks slipping to reveal genuine alarm. Ms. Delaney, Margaret Chen said, rising from her chair at the head of the table. This is highly irregular. We're in the middle of a private board meeting. I understand, Ava replied, her voice steady and professional. And I wouldn't interrupt if this weren't a matter of urgent importance. Mr. Frank Delaney has authorized me to present evidence of intellectual property theft within Crescendo Innovations. Derek stepped forward, his charming smile firmly in place but not quite reaching his eyes. There must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this privately after the board meeting. No misunderstanding, Mr. Ellison, Ava said coolly. And given that you're presenting stolen work to the board right now, I believe this is precisely the right time and place for this discussion. She turned to me. Ms. Blake, would you be willing to stay for this conversation? Before I could answer, Derek interjected. This is absurd. Madeline is a junior developer who contributed to my project. Whatever she's told you. I haven't spoken with Ms. Blake yet, Ava interrupted. My information comes directly from company servers and access logs. She placed her leather portfolio on the conference table and pulled out several documents. I have here a complete timeline of Project Echo's development, from initial concept to final implementation. The logs clearly show that Madeline Blake initiated the project 8 months ago, developed it independently, and only in the past 2 weeks has Mr. Ellison begun accessing and modifying her files. The board members leaned forward, their interest piqued. Margaret Chen extended her hand. May I see those documents? As the folder was passed to her, I stood frozen, hardly believing what was happening. How had Ava Delaney obtained this information? How was she connected to Frank, the elderly man I'd helped in the hallway? Ms. Blake, Charles Winthrop addressed me directly. Is what Ms. Delaney saying accurate? Did you develop Project Echo independently? I took a deep breath. This was my moment of truth. Yes, sir, I conceived the project, built the initial prototype, and refined it over 8 months. I have extensive documentation proving my authorship. Derek's face darkened. She worked under my direction. All intellectual property developed by employees belongs to Crescendo Innovations. This is a standard employment contract matter. That's correct, Ava agreed, surprising me. The company does own the intellectual property. However, the company should know who actually created it before making personnel decisions or public attribution. She pulled out another document, especially when preparing to terminate the actual creator. Margaret Chen's eyebrows shot up. Termination? Ms. Blake received notice yesterday that her position was being eliminated, Ava explained. Conveniently, right before the project launch. Margaret turned to Derek, her expression hardening. Is this true? Derek shifted uncomfortably. It was a team restructuring decision. Nothing to do with Project Echo specifically. That's not what the email records show, Ava countered, pulling out more documents. I have here communications between Mr. Ellison and HR explicitly discussing the removal of Ms. Blake to, and I quote, streamline the narrative around Project Echo's development. The room fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. How exactly did you obtain these records? Derek demanded, his composure slipping. This is corporate espionage. Ava smiled coolly. Mr. Frank Delaney still has his founder's access credentials to all company servers. As the emeritus board chairman, he has every right to investigate potential ethics violations within the company he built. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. The confused elderly man I'd helped in the hallway wasn't just any visitor. He was the Frank Delaney, the legendary founder of Crescendo Innovations. The company was named after his first successful audio technology patent from the 1980s. His portrait hung in the lobby, though the man I'd met looked older, more vulnerable than the confident figure in the painting. Margaret Chen looked stunned. Frank is personally involved in this? After Ms. Blake helped him during a panic attack yesterday, he became curious about her. When he looked into her work, he discovered what was happening with Project Echo. He was disturbed by what he found. She turned to me. Ms. Blake, my grandfather wanted me to tell you that in 40 years of business, he's learned that character matters more than credentials. You showed him kindness when others walked past. That says everything about who you are. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes but blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotion. This was the time for truth. I can verify every aspect of Project Echo's development, I said, my voice stronger now. I designed it for people like my brother Thomas, who is nonverbal autistic. Every feature, every line of code was documented in my development logs. Margaret nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Ava. What exactly is Frank asking for here? Proper attribution of the work, a full review of Mr. Ellison's conduct, and the immediate rescinding of Ms. Blake's termination. Notice, Ava stated firmly, Frank believes in Crescendo's mission to create technology that helps people. Project Echo exemplifies that mission, and he wants to ensure its creator remains part of its future. Derek's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is outrageous. I've given 8 years to this company. Are you really going to take the word of a junior developer and a retired oldie? Man who's clearly confused? Frank Delaney built this company on integrity, Charles Winthrop said quietly. If he's raising concerns, we have a duty to investigate them thoroughly. Margaret nodded in agreement. Ms. Delaney, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll need to review these documents carefully. She turned to me. Ms. Blake, your termination is suspended pending this investigation. Please continue your work on Project Echo. Derek started to protest, but Margaret silenced him with a raised hand. Derek, we'll discuss this privately. For now, I think it's best if you step back from the project launch this afternoon. You can't be serious, he sputtered. The launch is in 4 hours. I'm scheduled to present. Actually, I said, finding courage I didn't know I had. I can handle the presentation. I know every aspect of the project. Margaret's eyes met mine, evaluating. After a moment, she nodded. Good. Ms. Blake will present Project Echo today. Derek, my office now. Everyone else, we're adjourned. As the board members filed out, Derek shot me a venomous look before following Margaret. I stood there, still processing what had just happened, when Ava approached me. My grandfather would like to see you if you have time before the presentation, she said with a warm smile. He's waiting in his old office on the top floor. Yes, of course, I stammered. But I don't understand. Why did he do this for me? Ava's expression softened. He'll explain everything. But I will say this. In a world where people increasingly look away from others in distress, you stop to help. That matters to him. It matters a lot. As we walked toward the elevators together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. The project I had poured my heart and soul into hadn't been stolen after all. Someone had seen the truth and stepped forward to defend it. And it all began with a simple act of kindness in a hallway. The executive elevator required a special key card which Ava produced from her pocket. As we ascended to the top floor, I tried to gather my thoughts. I don't even know how to thank you, I said finally, breaking the silence. Ava smiled. Thank my grandfather. This was all his doing. I'm just the legal muscle. Pretty impressive muscle, I replied. How did you get those access logs so quickly? Grandfather may be retired, but he still has friends in the IT department who respect him more than they fear corporate politics. The elevator dinged as we reached the top floor. Also, he was quite serious about still having his founder's access credentials. The board never revoked them when he stepped down. The doors opened to reveal a reception area I'd never seen before, despite working at Crescendo for 2 years. This part of the building was reserved for the highest executives, a mythical realm to those of us who worked on the lower floors. Ava led me down a hallway lined with photographs documenting Crescendo's history. I recognized a younger Frank Delaney in many of them, accepting awards, cutting ribbons at facility openings, shaking hands with tech luminaries. We stopped at a heavy wooden door with a simple nameplate. F. Delaney, founder. Ava knocked softly before opening the door. Grandpa, I've brought Madeline Blake to see you. The office was smaller than I expected, but warm and inviting. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with technical manuals, biographies, and what appeared to be journals. Large windows offered a spectacular view of downtown Austin. Frank Delaney sat in a comfortable leather chair near the window, looking more composed than when I'd last seen him. He stood as we entered, leaning slightly on an elegant walking stick. Ms. Blake, he said warmly, extending his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you properly this time. Please have a seat. I shook his hand, still trying to reconcile this dignified businessman with the distressed man I'd encountered in the hallway. Mr. Delaney, I had no idea who you were yesterday. He chuckled. That made your kindness all the more meaningful. Please, call me Frank. As I took a seat across from him, he studied me with kind but perceptive eyes. First, I must apologize for my condition yesterday. I occasionally suffer from panic attacks, especially in places with strong memories attached. Coming back to Crescendo after so long, it was more overwhelming than I anticipated. There's no need to apologize, I assured him. Second, he continued, I want to thank you for your compassion. You were the only person who stopped to help me. That says a great deal about your character. Anyone would have done the same, I said, embarrassed by his praise. No, he said firmly. They wouldn't. And we both know that. 3. People walked past before you came along. I counted. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I remained silent. After you helped me, I was curious about you, Frank continued. So I did a little digging. What I discovered about Project Echo was disturbing. It reminded me why I stepped back from active management. The culture has changed since my day. Why did you get involved? I asked. You don't know me. Frank leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. Crescendo Innovations was built on two principles: creating technology that genuinely helps people, and treating employees with respect and integrity. When I saw what Derek Ellison was doing, stealing your work and pushing you out, I couldn't stand by and watch. But how did you know my work was good? That it was worth fighting? For? Frank smiled. I reviewed your code myself last night. I may be old, but I still understand good engineering when I see it. Project Echo is exceptional, Ms. Blake. Its potential to help people like your brother, it's exactly the kind of innovation I always hoped Crescendo would create. I felt tears threatening again. Thank you, that means a lot coming from you. Now, Frank said, his tone becoming more businesslike. About the presentation this afternoon, are you prepared to take the lead? I nodded, though my stomach tightened at the thought. I know the project inside and out, but I've never presented to investors before. You'll do wonderfully, he assured me. Just speak from your heart about why you created Echo. Authentic passion is more compelling than any polished sales pitch. Ava, who had been quietly observing our conversation, added, I'll be there as well, along with grandfather. For moral support. Frank nodded. And to send a clear message about where the founder's support lies. He reached for a folder on the side table. Before you go, there's something else you should know. I've been reviewing other projects Derek has overseen during his tenure. He handed me the folder. Inside were documents showing a pattern. Junior developers creating innovative solutions, then being sidelined or let go while Derek presented their work as his own. This wasn't just about you, Frank said solemnly. It was a pattern of behavior. You were just the first one who had someone notice and intervene. I flipped through the pages, recognizing names of former colleagues who had suddenly left the company. This is heartbreaking. It's also being addressed, Ava assured me. The board will be conducting a thorough review of all his projects. Margaret Chen has already agreed to this. Frank checked his watch. You should prepare for your presentation. Use my office if you'd like. It's quiet, and no one will disturb you here. I couldn't possibly. Please, he insisted. Consider it yours for the afternoon. Ava and I have some other matters to attend to before the launch event. As they prepared to leave, Frank paused at the door. Ms. Blake, Madeline, there's one more thing. Whatever happens today, remember that you created something valuable, something that will help people. No one can take that achievement away from you. After they left, I sat in the founder's office, surrounded by the history of Crescendo Innovations, preparing to present my project to the world. It felt surreal. 24 hours ago, I had been facing termination and the theft of my work. Now, I was sitting in Frank Delaney's office, about to lead the launch of Project Echo under my own name. I opened my laptop and began reviewing my presentation notes, determined to make the most of this unexpected opportunity. As I worked, I glanced occasionally at the view of Austin spreading out before me, feeling for the first time that my place in this company, in this city, might be secure after all. Sometimes I realized justice arrives in the most unexpected ways, delivered by the most unexpected messengers. The Crescendo Innovations launch event was held in the company's expansive atrium. Glass walls soared 3 stories high, flooding the space with afternoon sunlight. A stage had been set up at one end, complete with an enormous screen displaying the Project Echo logo I had designed, a sound wave transforming into a human figure, representing the bridge between technology and human expression. Rows of chairs filled with investors, tech, journalists, and industry leaders faced the stage. I watched from behind a pillar as they filed in, my heart hammering against my ribs. The folder containing my presentation notes trembled slightly in my hands. Nervous? I turned to find Frank Delaney standing beside me, leaning on his walking stick. Terrified, I admitted. I've never spoken in front of this many people. He nodded, understandingly. I still get nervous before speaking, even after all these years. But remember, you know this project better than anyone in this room. You created it. Let that confidence guide you. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just some junior developer trying to take credit? Frank smiled. That's why I'm here, and why Ava insisted on making a statement before your presentation. He gestured toward the stage where Ava was speaking with Margaret Chen. The board has already been informed of the situation. They're behind you, Madeline. I took a deep breath. Is Derek here? No. Margaret asked him to leave the premises for today. His future with the company is uncertain. Frank's expression turned serious. There will be a full investigation into his past projects. This pattern of behavior won't continue. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, and Margaret Chen stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Crescendo Innovations. Today, we're excited to present a groundbreaking new technology that embodies our mission of creating accessible, human-centered tools. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone special. Our founder, Frank Delaney. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd as Frank made his way to the stage. Though he had retired years ago, his reputation in the tech industry remained legendary. Thank you, Margaret, Frank said, his voice strong despite his age. It's good to be back at Crescendo, if only for a visit. When I founded this company 30 years ago, my vision was simple: create technology that genuinely helps people while maintaining the highest standards of integrity. Today, I'm proud to see that vision continuing with Project Echo. He paused, scanning the audience. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It comes from passionate individuals with personal connections to the problems they're solving. Today, you'll meet one such individual, the creator of Project Echo, Madeline Blake. My cue. I stepped onto the stage, grateful that my legs carried me forward despite my nerves. Frank squeezed my shoulder supportively as we passed each other. Standing at the podium, I gazed out at the sea of expectant faces. For a moment, my mind went blank. Then I spotted Ava in the front row, giving me an encouraging nod. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. My name is Madeline Blake, and I'm the lead developer of Project Echo. This project began 8 months ago with a simple question: how can we help nonverbal individuals communicate more naturally with technology? I clicked to the first slide, a photograph of my brother Thomas smiling at the camera. This is my brother Thomas. He's 24 years old, loves baseball, and has an encyclopedic knowledge of trains. He's also autistic and nonverbal. For Thomas and millions like him, traditional interfaces create barriers rather than bridges. As I continued my presentation, explaining the technical challenges and solutions we'd developed, I felt my nervousness dissolve into the passion that had driven me all these months. I demonstrated how Echo could interpret micro-expressions, slight gestures, and eye movements, translating them into commands and communications. I showed videos of early testing, including one of Thomas successfully using the system to control his smart home devices without traditional inputs. Echo doesn't just respond to commands, I explained. It learns and adapts to each user's unique patterns. The more someone uses it, the more intuitive the interaction becomes. The audience was engaged, leaning forward, taking notes. I saw genuine interest in their eyes, not just in the commercial potential, but in the human impact. When I finished the technical portion, I paused, gathering my courage for what I wanted to say next. Technology at its best doesn't just solve problems. It expands human potential. For people like my brother, Echo isn't just a convenience, it's freedom. It's expression. It's connection. My voice grew stronger. That's the technology I believe in building. Not just what's profitable, but what's meaningful. The applause that followed was thunderous. As it died down, Margaret joined me on stage for the Q&A session. The questions came rapidly, thoughtful, challenging, excited. With each answer, I felt more confident, more certain that this was where I belonged. Toward the end, a tech journalist from the front row asked, "What's next for Project Echo? Where do you see it going from here?" I glanced at Margaret, unsure how much I could share about future plans given the day's earlier drama. She nodded encouragingly. "We have several directions planned," I said. Expanding language processing capabilities, developing more specialized interfaces for different conditions, and creating an open API so other developers can build on the platform. Ultimately, I envision Echo becoming as universal and essential as touchscreens, a fundamental way humans interact with technology. After the final question, Margaret stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming. We'll be demonstrating Project Echo in the reception area, where you can experience it firsthand. Please join us for refreshments." As the crowd began moving toward the demonstration stations, Frank and Ava approached me. "Brilliant," Frank said warmly. "Absolutely brilliant." "You knocked it out of the park," Ava agreed. I saw at least 3 investors practically salivating. Margaret joined our small circle. "Madeline, that was exceptional. The board is impressed, not just with the technology, but with how you handled yourself today." "Thank you," I said, still riding the adrenaline high of the presentation. What happens now? With the project? I hesitated, not wanting to say Derek's name. The project moves forward under your leadership, Margaret said firmly. As for other matters, we'll address those in the coming days. For now, enjoy this moment. You've earned it. As she moved away to greet investors, Frank placed a gentle hand on my arm. Come to my office tomorrow morning. There's something important I'd like to discuss with you. Before I could ask what he meant, we were surrounded by attendees eager to learn more about Echo. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of demonstrations, technical discussions, and congratulations. Hours later, as the last guest departed and the cleaning crew began breaking down the event space, I stood alone in the quiet atrium. 24 hours ago, I had been facing the end of my career at Crescendo. Now, I was leading Project Echo into its future, all because I stopped to help a stranger in a hallway. The next morning, I arrived at Crescendo, earlier than usual. The building was quiet, with only a few early risers populating the cubicles and break rooms. After yesterday's emotional roller coaster, I had barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities for Echo's future now that it was truly mine again. I took the executive elevator to the top floor, Frank's keycard still in my possession from the day before. The weight of it in my hand felt symbolic somehow, a token of trust I hadn't expected. When I reached Frank's office, I was surprised to find not just him, but Ava and Margaret Chen waiting for me. They sat around a small conference table near the window, coffee and pastries laid out between them. Madeline, good morning, Frank greeted me warmly. Please join us. I took the empty seat, my curiosity growing. Is everything okay? More than okay, Margaret said. We've been discussing your future at Crescendo. Frank pushed a folder toward me. Before we begin, I'd like you to know that the board held an emergency meeting last night regarding Derek Ellison. I opened the folder to find a formal letter stating that Derek had been terminated effective immediately for ethics violations and intellectual property theft. He'll be escorted to collect his personal belongings later today, Margaret explained. We've also begun reviewing all his previous projects, as Frank suggested. What about the other developers? I asked, thinking of the pattern Frank had shown me. We're reaching out to each of them, Ava said. Those who left the company under similar circumstances will be invited to discuss potential remediation. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you. That means a lot. Now, to the real reason for this meeting, Frank said, leaning forward. Madeline, your presentation yesterday confirmed what I suspected when I reviewed your work. You're not just a talented developer. You're an innovator with vision and integrity, qualities that are increasingly rare in this industry. Margaret nodded in agreement. The board was impressed not just with Echo, but with how you handled yourself during yesterday's crisis. You showed remarkable composure and professionalism. Which brings us to our proposition, Frank continued. Crescendo Innovations needs to refocus on its original mission, creating technology that genuinely helps people. We'd like you to help lead that effort. I blinked in surprise. I'm sorry, what exactly are you offering? We're creating a new division, Margaret explained. Adaptive Technology Solutions. It will focus on developing tools like Echo for underserved populations. We'd like you to head it as director. My jaw dropped. Director? But I'm just a brilliant developer with a clear vision and deep personal connection to the work, Frank finished for me. Exactly what the position requires. This is a significant promotion, Margaret acknowledged. But after what we saw yesterday, the board is confident in your abilities. Ava slid another document across the table. This is the formal offer. The compensation package reflects the position's responsibilities. Take your time reviewing it. I glanced at the salary figure and nearly choked on my coffee. It was more than triple my current pay. This is incredibly generous, I managed. It's fair, Frank corrected. Derek was grossly underpaying you relative to your contributions. There's one more thing, Margaret added. Frank has agreed to come on as a special advisor to your division. He'll be available to provide guidance as you build your team. I looked at Frank in surprise. You're coming out of retirement? He chuckled. Part-time only. I'm too old for the daily grind, but I'd like to help shape this new direction for Crescendo. And he hesitated. I find I've missed the work more than I expected. What do you say, Madeline? Margaret asked. Are you interested? I took a deep breath, trying to process the whirlwind of changes. Yes, absolutely yes. But I'll need to build a team I can trust. You'll have complete autonomy in hiring, Margaret assured me, and substantial resources to recruit the right talent. I already have some ideas, I said, thinking of former colleagues who had left the company under similar circumstances to what I had nearly faced. People who share the vision and have the skills to make it reality. Excellent, Frank said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Now there's one more matter to discuss. Your brother Thomas. I looked at him questioningly. You mentioned yesterday that Echo was inspired by his needs, Frank continued. I'd like to establish a formal partnership with organizations serving people like Thomas to ensure our technology truly meets their requirements. Would you be willing to help facilitate that connection? Of course, I said, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thomas would be thrilled. He's always wanted to be more involved in what I do. Perfect. Then I believe we have an agreement. Frank extended his hand across the table. Welcome to your new role, Director Blake. As we shook hands, I felt a profound sense of validation, not just for my work, but for the path that had led me here. Every late night, every challenge overcome, every moment of doubt pushed through. There will be an official announcement this afternoon, Margaret said, rising from her chair. But you can start transitioning immediately. Your new office is being prepared as we speak, 2 doors down from Frank's. After Margaret left for another meeting, Ava lingered behind, though, with her grandfather. I have to ask, I said to them both. Why did you do all this for me? Frank, you could have just reported what Derek was doing without getting personally involved. Frank exchanged a glance with Ava before answering. When I built Crescendo, I had a vision for the kind of company it would be, one where innovation and integrity went hand in hand. Over the years, I've watched that vision erode as growth and profit became the primary focus. My grandfather has been looking for a way to course correct, Ava explained. When he saw what was happening with your project, he recognized an opportunity. Not just to right a wrong, Frank added, but to begin reshaping the company's culture. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up for what's right to create meaningful change. Like someone stopping to help a stranger in distress, I said, understanding dawning. Frank smiled. Exactly. Character reveals itself in those unguarded moments when we think no one is watching. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You know, I interviewed hundreds of people when I was building Crescendo. I always looked for the same qualities, not just technical brilliance, but empathy, integrity, and genuine passion for the work. And you think I have those qualities? I asked. I know you do, he said with certainty. I saw it in that hallway, and I saw it again yesterday when you presented Echo not as a product, but as a mission. Ava checked her watch. I should go. I have a meeting with HR about the investigation into Derek's other projects. She shook my hand. Congratulations, Director Blake. I have a feeling we'll be working together often. After she left, Frank stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Austin skyline. You know, when I had that panic attack, I was actually coming to meet with Margaret about my concerns for Crescendo's future. I've been worried about the company's direction for some time. And now? I asked, joining him at the window. Now, he said with satisfaction, I believe Crescendo is back on the right path, thanks in no small part to you. As we stood there together, looking out over the city, I felt a profound sense of rightness, as if after years of working toward an undefined goal, I had finally found exactly where I was meant to be. Frank, I said quietly, thank you for believing in me. He turned to me with a gentle smile. Sometimes, Madeline, the universe has a peculiar way of putting the right people in the right place at exactly the right moment. Our job is simply to recognize those moments when they arrive. Looking back, that conversation marked the true beginning of my new journey at Crescendo, not just as a director, but as someone entrusted with carrying forward a vision, larger than myself. A vision of technology that served humanity's deepest needs with integrity and compassion, all because I stopped to help a stranger in a hallway. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. My new role as Director of Adaptive Technology Solutions brought challenges I never anticipated, but also rewards beyond anything I could have imagined. The morning light streamed through the windows of my corner office as I reviewed the quarterly report for our division. Project Echo had officially launched 3 months ago to widespread acclaim. The testimonials from early users filled several pages of the report. Parents of nonverbal children, adults with various communication challenges, and assisted living facilities all reporting significant improvements in digital accessibility. A knock at my door pulled me from my reading. Thomas stood in the doorway, a visitor badge clipped to his shirt, accompanied by his support specialist, Karen. Good morning, Director Blake, Karen said with a smile. Your 9 o'clock is here for the user testing session. Thomas gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up, his own way of greeting. At 24, my brother had the same darky hair and hazel eyes as me, though he stood several inches taller. Today, he wore a Crescendo Innovations t-shirt I'd given him, proudly displaying the company logo. Perfect timing, I said, rising from my desk to greet them. The team is ready in the lab. One of my first initiatives had been establishing a dedicated testing facility where people with various communication needs could interact directly with our developers. Thomas had become a regular visitor, not just as my brother, but as a valued consultant whose insights had already improved Echo's interface in countless ways. As we walked through the office, employees greeted Thomas by name. He responded in his way, a nod here, a wave there, occasionally using the Echo interface on his tablet to generate a response. The technology had opened new avenues of communication for him, though he still preferred his established methods for most interactions. "How's the new apartment?" Karen asked as we waited for the elevator. "Wonderful," I replied. "Having Thomas nearby makes everything easier." I had recently moved to a larger place closer to the supportive living community where Thomas resided. The promotion had made it possible for me to create a life that better accommodated both our needs. The elevator doors opened to reveal Frank Delaney. "Thomas," Frank exclaimed warmly. "Just the expert I was hoping to see today." Thomas's face lit up with recognition. He and Frank had developed a special bond over the past months. Frank had a grandfatherly patience that put Thomas at ease, and Thomas responded to Frank's genuine interest in his perspective. Using his tablet, Thomas typed quickly, and the Echo interface spoke for him. "Hello, Mr. Delaney. I brought new train models for your office." Frank's collection of model trains had started with a single engine Thomas had given him after learning of Frank's childhood fascination with railroads. Now, a detailed display took up an entire shelf in Frank's office, each piece carefully selected by Thomas. "I can't wait to see them," Frank said sincerely. "Perhaps after your testing session?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically. When we reached the testing lab, the development team was waiting. This team had been carefully built over the past 6 months. A mixture of existing Crescendo employees who shared our vision and new hires bringing fresh perspectives. Among them were several developers who had previously left the company under Derek's management, now returned with renewed enthusiasm. "Okay, Thomas," said Maya, our lead interface designer. "Today we're testing the new emotion recognition algorithms. Ready to put them through their paces?" For the next hour, I observed as Thomas and 3 other testers with different communication needs interacted with the latest Echo prototype. The technology had evolved significantly since its initial launch, now capable of detecting subtle emotional states and adjusting its responses accordingly. Afterward, as promised, Thomas visited Frank's office to add to the train collection while I returned to my own work. Around noon, Ava Delaney appeared in my doorway. "Got time for lunch?" she asked. "I have news." Over the past months, Ava had become more than just a legal advisor. She'd become a friend. We found common ground in our dedication to our work and our somewhat complicated family dynamics. "Always," I said, grabbing my jacket. "The usual place?" We walked to a small cafe 2 blocks from the Crescendo building, claiming our regular table by the window. "So," Ava said after we'd ordered, "the last of the Derek Ellison investigations has been completed." "And?" I asked, leaning forward. 7 cases total where he took credit for other developers' work," she said, shaking her head. 3 of those developers have returned to Crescendo under your division. The others have received settlements and formal apologies from the company." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "And Derek? He's having trouble finding work in Austin," Ava said without sympathy. "Turns out word gets around when you steal intellectual property." "I don't wish him ill," I said truthfully. "I just wanted justice for everyone affected." "Well, justice has been served," Ava said, raising her water glass in a mock toast. "And Crescendo is stronger for it. The company's reputation has actually improved since the board took such decisive action." Our food arrived, and the conversation shifted to more personal matters. "How's your grandfather?" I asked. "I haven't seen him this week." "Good days and bad," Ava replied. "The doctors are adjusting his medication for the anxiety, which seems to be helping, but he's been talking about reducing his advisory role even further." I nodded, trying not to show my disappointment. Frank's guidance had been invaluable as I navigated my new responsibilities. He deserves to enjoy his retirement. "The thing is," Ava said, studying me carefully, "he doesn't want to leave you without support. He mentioned that the board is considering adding a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer, someone to ensure that all of Crescendo's projects maintain the focus on human-centered design." I raised my eyebrows. That sounds like an important role. It is, Ava agreed, and grandfather thinks you should be considered for it. I nearly choked on my sandwich. Me? But I've only been a director for 6 months. 6 extremely successful months, Ava pointed out. Echo has exceeded all projections, both financially and in terms of user impact. The adaptive technology division is now Crescendo's fastest growing department, and perhaps most importantly, you've rebuilt the company culture in your area. People want to work for you, Madeline. I shook my head, overwhelmed by the suggestion. I'm still learning how to be a director. Just think about it, Ava urged. The position won't be officially created for several months. Grandfather wanted me to plant the seed now so you could prepare. I'll think about it, I promised, though the idea seemed far beyond my reach. After lunch, I returned to find Thomas waiting in my office with Karen. Testing all done? I asked. Thomas nodded, then used his tablet to communicate. Frank says he's proud of you. Me too. A lump formed in my throat. Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot to me. As they prepared to leave, Thomas handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a model train engine, identical to the one he had given Frank. So your office matches his, the Echo interface translated as Thomas typed. I hugged my brother tightly, overwhelmed by the simple thoughtfulness of his gift. It's perfect, I whispered. Absolutely perfect. After they left, I placed the train engine on my desk, where I could see it every day, a reminder of the journey that had brought me here and the people who had made it possible. Later that afternoon, I had my weekly meeting with Margaret Chen to discuss the division's progress. As we wrapped up, she mentioned casually, Frank tells me you've been discussing the Chief Innovation Officer position with Ava. I felt my cheeks flush. She mentioned it? Yes. But honestly, Margaret, I think it's premature to consider me for such a role. Margaret studied me thoughtfully. 6 months ago, you thought being a director was beyond your capabilities. Yet here you are, exceeding all expectations. That's different, I protested. I knew the technology. I understood the mission. And you don't understand innovation? She challenged gently. Madeline, what do you think you've been doing all this time? I had no answer for that. Just consider it, she said, echoing Ava's words. Crescendo needs leaders who remember why we create technology in the first place, to improve human lives. You never forget that, not for a moment. As she left my office, I turned to look out the window at the Austin skyline, marveling at how much had changed in 6 short months. From nearly losing everything to being considered for an executive position, it seemed impossible. Yet as the afternoon sun glinted off the downtown buildings, I allowed myself to imagine it, not for the title or the prestige, but for the opportunity to ensure that Crescendo's technology always served its highest purpose, enhancing human connection, expression, and potential. That evening, as I prepared to leave, I stopped by Frank's office. He was sitting in his favorite chair, examining the new train Thomas had brought him. Got a minute? I asked from the doorway. He looked up with a warm smile. For you? Always. 1 year to the day after I helped Frank Delaney in that 7th floor hallway, Crescendo Innovations held a special event. The company had transformed dramatically in those 12 months, returning to its founding principles while pushing forward into new technological frontiers. The atrium was filled beyond capacity, with employees from every department gathered to hear the announcement. I stood backstage, adjusting the jacket of my new suit, a far cry from the lavender sweater I'd worn a year ago. Nervous? Frank asked, appearing beside me, with his trademark quiet step. Terrified, I admitted. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. If you were completely sure, I'd be worried, he said with a gentle smile. The best leaders always question themselves. It keeps them humble and open to learning. The past year had seen me grow from Director of Adaptive Technology Solutions to my new role, officially beginning today, Chief Innovation Officer of Crescendo Innovations. The position had been created with careful thought, designed to ensure that the company's technological direction remained aligned with its human-centered mission. What if I fail? I asked softly, voicing my deepest fear. Then you'll learn and try again, Frank said simply. That's what innovation is, Madeline. Not perfection, persistence. Margaret Chen's voice came through the speakers, addressing the crowd. A year ago, Crescendo Innovations recommitted to its founding principle, creating technology that genuinely improves human lives. Today, we take another step forward on that journey. From the wings, I could see the audience. Thomas sat in the front row with Karen, wearing a tie for the special occasion. Beside him was Ava, who gave me an eye, encouraging thumbs up when she caught my eye. The development team from Adaptive Technology Solutions filled several rows, their faces proud and expectant. "Please welcome to the stage," Margaret continued, "the founder of Crescendo Innovations, Frank Delaney, and our new Chief Innovation Officer, Madeline Blake." Frank squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." We walked onto the stage together, greeted by enthusiastic applause. As I took my place at the podium, I looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who had become friends, supporters who had become mentors, strangers who had become family. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady and clear. 1 year ago, I stood in this atrium presenting Project Echo, never imagining where that path would lead. Today, Echo has helped thousands of people like my brother Thomas communicate more effectively with the world around them. But the journey was never just about one project. I gestured to Frank. It was about rediscovering what makes technology truly meaningful, its capacity to solve real human problems with compassion and integrity. Frank stepped forward to stand beside me. When I founded Crescendo 30 years ago, I had a simple vision: create technology that helps people while treating everyone involved, employees, users, partners, with respect. Today, I'm proud to see that vision revitalized under Madeline's leadership. The position of Chief Innovation Officer isn't just about developing new products, I continued. It's about ensuring that every solution we create enhances human connection rather than replacing it. Technology at its best doesn't distance us from each other. It brings us closer together. As I outlined my vision for Crescendo's future, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but each challenge had prepared me for this moment, standing confidently before hundreds of people, articulating a vision that once existed only in my mind. After the formal presentation, we unveiled the newest iteration of Echo, now expanded into a comprehensive platform for adaptive communication. The demonstration included videos of users around the world whose lives had been transformed by the technology, children expressing themselves for the first time, elderly individuals maintaining independence, communities bridging language barriers. The IT final video featured Thomas explaining in his own words, through Echo, what the technology meant to him. "Before Echo, I had thoughts I couldn't share," his recorded voice stated clearly. "Now I can tell people what I think, what I feel, what I dream. My sister made this happen because she understood what I needed. That's what good technology does. It understands what humans need." There wasn't a dry eye in the house when the video ended. Thomas stood and received a standing ovation, his face flushed with pleasure at the recognition. The formal event transitioned into a reception, where I found myself surrounded by well-wishers, industry partners, and media representatives. Through it all, I maintained the calm, confident presence I had developed over the past year, a far cry from the nervous developer who had once sat silently at the end of a conference table. As the crowd thinned, I found myself standing near the 7th floor elevators, the exact spot where I had first encountered Frank Delaney. "Quite a journey, wouldn't you say?" Frank's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me with a knowing smile. "From this hallway to the executive floor," I agreed. "I never saw it coming. The best journeys are often the ones we don't plan," he said, leaning comfortably on his walking stick. "I certainly didn't plan to have a panic attack that day. But now," he gestured toward the celebration still ongoing in the atrium. "I can't help thinking it was exactly what needed to happen. For both of us," I added. Frank nodded thoughtfully. "You know, in all my years in business, I've learned one thing above all else. Success isn't measured in patents or profits. It's measured in lives improved, including our own." As we stood there, Ava and Thomas joined us. Thomas had his tablet ready and typed quickly. "Are you the boss of everyone now, Maddie?" I laughed. "Not exactly, but I do get to help make sure we're creating technology that helps people like, you." He nodded seriously, then typed, "Good. Most technology is not made for people like me." "That's changing," Frank assured him. "Thanks to your sister." As Thomas and Ava moved ahead toward the reception, Frank lingered, gazing around the hallway. "You know, I think I'll always remember this spot fondly now," he said. "Not as the place where I had a panic attack, but as the place where Crescendo's future changed course. All because someone stopped to help a stranger," I said softly. "The smallest acts often have the greatest impact," Frank agreed. "Remember that in your new role, Madeline. Sometimes the most innovative solutions aren't the most complex. They're the most human." We rejoined the reception, where champagne was being served to celebrate the occasion. Margaret Chen, raised her glass in a toast. To Crescendo Innovations, she said. To Frank Delaney, whose vision started it all. And to Madeline Blake, who reminded us what that vision truly means. As glasses clinked around the room, I caught Thomas's eye. He gave me our special signal, a subtle gesture we had developed years ago, long before Echo existed. It was his way of saying, "I'm proud of you." Later that evening, after the celebrations ended and the atrium emptied, I returned to my new office on the executive floor. The view of Austin at night was breathtaking, the city lights spreading out like a constellation below. On my desk sat the model train Thomas had given me, now joined by several others, a small collection matching the one in Frank's office. Beside them was a framed photograph from today's ceremony. Frank, Thomas, Ava, and me, all smiling together. I ran my fingers lightly over the train engine, remembering how far we had all come in just 1 year. From near disaster to new beginnings, from isolation to connection, from silence to voice. My computer pinged with a message from Thomas, sent through the Echo platform we had built together. "Good night, Maddie. You helped me find my voice. Now you're helping others find theirs too." I typed back, "That's what family does, Thomas. We help each other be heard." As I prepared to leave for the night, I paused at the window for one last look at the city. Somewhere out there, people were using Echo to express thoughts they'd never been able to share before. Children were connecting with parents. Patients were communicating with doctors. Barriers were falling, one word at a time. All because of a chance encounter in a hallway. All because I stopped to help a stranger in distress. Sometimes the smallest moments contain the greatest opportunities. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can change everything. And sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe has a way of bringing us exactly where we need to be. 6. Months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The morning light streamed through the windows of my corner office as I reviewed the quarterly report for our division. Project Echo had launched 3 months earlier to widespread acclaim, with testimonials from families of nonverbal individuals, care facilities, and education centers filling my inbox daily. A knock at my door interrupted my reading. I looked up to see Thomas standing in the doorway, his visitor badge clipped to his polo shirt. At 24, my brother had the same dark hair and hazel eyes as me, though he stood several inches taller. "Hey there," I smiled, rising to greet him. "Ready for the testing session?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically, holding up his tablet. Using the Echo interface, he typed quickly, and the system spoke for him. I found 3 new improvements for the gesture recognition. One of my first initiatives as Director of Adaptive Technology Solutions, my official title now, had been establishing a dedicated testing facility where people with various communication needs could interact directly with our developers. Thomas had become a regular consultant, his insights improving Echo in ways no neurotypical developer could have imagined. "Perfect timing," I said. "The team is waiting in the lab." As we walked through the office, employees greeted Thomas by name. He had become a familiar and valued presence at Crescendo, his contributions recognized throughout the company. When we reached the testing lab, Maya, our lead interface designer, welcomed us. "Thomas, just the expert we need. We've implemented that scrolling modification you suggested last week." For the next hour, I observed as Thomas and 2 other consultants with different communication needs tested the latest Echo updates. The technology had evolved significantly, now capable of detecting subtle emotional nuances and adapting its interface accordingly. After the session, Thomas joined Frank for lunch, a weekly tradition they had established. The unlikely friendship between my brother and the company's founder had blossomed over shared interests in trains and classical music. Frank had discovered that Thomas's precise memory and attention to detail made him an excellent chess opponent, and they often spent hours in strategic battles that Frank rarely won. I returned to my office to find Ava Delaney, waiting. "Got a minute?" she asked, her expression serious. Over the past months, Ava had become more than a legal advisor. She'd become a friend. We found common ground in our dedication to our work and our somewhat complicated family dynamics. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. "What's up?" "The Derek Ellison investigation is complete," she said, placing a folder on my desk. 7 cases total where he took credit for others' work. 3 of those developers have returned to Crescendo under your division. I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "And the others?" "They've received settlements and formal apologies from the company," Ava said. "The board wanted me to thank you for bringing this pattern to light. It's led to a complete overhaul of project attribution policies." "And Derek?" I asked, Not from vindictiveness, but genuine curiosity. He's having trouble finding work in Austin, Ava replied without sympathy. Word gets around when you steal intellectual property. I don't wish him ill, I said truthfully. I just wanted justice for everyone affected. Well, justice has been served, Ava said, rising from her chair. And Crescendo is stronger for it. The company's reputation has actually improved since the board took such decisive action. After Ava left, I spent the afternoon in meetings with potential partners, healthcare providers, education specialists, and accessibility advocates, all eager to implement Echo in their environments. The project that had nearly been stolen from me was now helping thousands of people like Thomas communicate more effectively. Around 5, Frank appeared in my doorway, leaning slightly on his walking stick. Got a minute? He asked, echoing Ava's earlier question. For you? Always, I smiled, gesturing to the comfortable chairs by the window, a deliberate echo of his own office arrangement upstairs. Frank settled himself with a contented sigh. Thomas beat me at chess again. That boy has a tactical mind, like no one I've ever met. He's always been that way, I said proudly. Even as a kid, he could see patterns nobody else noticed, which is precisely why his input on Echo has been so valuable. Frank nodded. He sees what the rest of us miss. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the Austin skyline. Hard to believe it's been 6 months, Frank said finally. Since that day in the hallway. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, I admitted. Other times it feels like another lifetime. Life has a way of creating distinct chapters, doesn't it? Frank mused. Before and after moments that change everything. I nodded, thinking of how dramatically my life had transformed. From nearly losing my job and my project to leading a growing division with substantial resources and autonomy. My apartment was bigger now, closer to Thomas's supportive living community. My relationship with my brother had deepened as we collaborated professionally, and I had gained mentors and friends I never expected. I wanted to talk to you about something important, Frank said, his tone growing more serious. The board meeting yesterday. I straightened, suddenly alert. Is everything okay? More than okay, he assured me. They reviewed the quarterly numbers for Echo. The adoption rate is exceeding all projections, both in user numbers and revenue. But more importantly, the impact metrics are off the charts. Lives changed, Madeline. Thousands of them already. Pride warmed my chest. That's what matters most. Indeed it is, Frank agreed. Which brings me to the board's decision. They're creating a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer. Someone to ensure that all of Crescendo's projects maintain the focus on human-centered design. My eyebrows rose. That sounds like an important role. It is, Frank nodded. And they want you to consider it. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Me? But I've only been a director for 6 months. 6 extraordinarily successful months, Frank countered. You've not only made Echo a success, you've transformed the company culture in your division. People want to work for you, Madeline. You inspire them. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I'm still learning how to be a director. And you'll learn to be a CIO, Frank said simply. That's how growth works. We step into roles that challenge us, then grow to fill them. I don't know, I hesitated. It's a huge responsibility. Frank leaned forward, his blue eyes intent. Do you know why I founded Crescendo Innovations 30 years ago? I shook my head. I wanted to create technology that genuinely helped people, that made lives better, not just more convenient. Over the years, that vision got diluted as growth and profit became the primary focus. He sighed. That's partly why I stepped back. I couldn't bear watching my company lose its soul. And now? I asked softly. Now I see a chance to restore that original vision, he said, his voice strengthening. Through you, Madeline. You never forget why we create technology in the first place. To improve human lives. Not for a moment do you lose sight of that. I sat with his words, feeling their weight and truth. Just consider it, Frank urged. The position won't be officially created for several months. I wanted to plant the seed now so you could prepare. After he left, I turned to look out the window at the city spread before me. From nearly losing everything to being considered for an executive position, it seemed impossible. Yet as the sunset painted, the sky in brilliant orange and pink, I allowed myself to imagine it. Not for the title or prestige, but for the opportunity to ensure that Crescendo's technology always served its highest purpose, enhancing human connection, expression, and potential. On my desk sat the model train engine Thomas had given me months ago, a twin to the one in Frank's office. I picked it up, running my fingers over its detailed surface. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness set in motion changes we could never imagine. 1 year to the day after I helped Frank Delaney in that 7th-floor hallway, Crescendo Innovations held a special event. The atrium was filled beyond capacity, with employees from every department gathered to hear the announcement. I stood backstage, adjusting my new suit jacket, a far cry from the lavender sweater I'd worn a year ago. "Nervous?" Frank asked, appearing beside me with his characteristic quiet step. "Terrified," I admitted. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this." "If you were completely sure, I'd be worried," he said with a gentle smile. "The best leaders always question themselves. It keeps them humble and open to learning." The past year had seen me grow from a nearly terminated developer to director of adaptive technology solutions, and now to my new role, officially beginning today, Chief Innovation Officer of Crescendo Innovations. The position had been created with careful thought, designed to ensure that the company's technological direction remained aligned with its human-centered mission. "What if I fail?" I asked softly, voicing my deepest fear. "Then you'll learn and try again," Frank said simply. "That's what innovation is, Madeline. Not perfection, persistence." Margaret Chen's voice came through the speakers, addressing the crowd. A year ago, Crescendo Innovations recommitted to its founding principle, creating technology that genuinely improves human lives. Today, we take another step forward on that journey. From the wings, I could see the audience. Thomas sat in the front row with his support specialist, Karen, wearing a tie for the special occasion. Beside him was Ava, who gave me an encouraging thumbs up when she caught my eye. The development team from Adaptive Technology Solutions filled several rows, their faces proud and expectant. "Please welcome to the stage," Margaret continued, "the founder of Crescendo Innovations, Frank Delaney, and our new Chief Innovation Officer, Madeline Blake." Frank squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready?" We walked onto the stage together, greeted by enthusiastic applause. As I took my place at the podium, I looked out at the sea of faces. Colleagues who had become friends, supporters who had become mentors, strangers who had become family. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady and clear. 1 year ago, I stood in this atrium presenting Project Echo, never imagining where that path would lead. Today, Echo has helped thousands of people like my brother Thomas communicate more effectively with the world around them. But the journey was never just about one project. I gestured to Frank. It was about rediscovering what makes technology truly meaningful, its capacity to solve real human problems with compassion and integrity. Frank stepped forward to stand beside me. "When I founded Crescendo 30 years ago, I had a simple vision: create technology that helps people while treating everyone involved, employees, users, partners, with respect. Today, I'm proud to see that vision revitalized under Madeline's leadership. The position of Chief Innovation Officer isn't just about developing new products," I continued. "It's about ensuring that every solution we create enhances human connection rather than replacing it. Technology at its best doesn't distance us from each other, it brings us closer together." After the formal presentation, we unveiled the newest iteration of Echo, now expanded into a comprehensive platform for adaptive communication. The demonstration included videos of users around the world whose lives had been transformed by the technology, children expressing themselves for the first time, elderly individuals maintaining independence, communities bridging language barriers. The final video featured Thomas, explaining in his own words, through Echo, what the technology meant to him. "Before Echo, I had thoughts I couldn't share," his recorded voice stated clearly. "Now I can tell people what I think, what I feel, what I dream. My sister made this happen because she understood what I needed. That's what good technology does. It understands what humans need." There wasn't a dry eye in the house when the video ended. Thomas stood and received a standing ovation, his face flushed with pleasure at the recognition. Later, as the formal event transitioned into a reception, I found myself standing near the 7th-floor elevators, the exact spot where I had first encountered Frank Delaney. "Quite a journey, wouldn't you say?" Frank's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me with a knowing smile. "From this hallway to the executive floor," I agreed. "I never saw it coming. The best journeys are often the ones we don't plan," he said, leaning comfortably on his walking stick. "I certainly didn't plan to have a panic attack that day. But now," he gestured toward the celebration still ongoing in the atrium. I can't help thinking it was exactly what needed to happen. For both of us, I added. Frank nodded thoughtfully. You know, in all my years in business, I've learned one thing above all else. Success isn't measured in patents or profits. It's measured in lives improved, including our own. As we stood there, Ava joined us, champagne flute in hand. Congratulations, Madeline. The board couldn't be more pleased with the direction you're taking the company. I couldn't have done it without you, I said sincerely. Your intervention that day changed everything. I was just the messenger, Ava demurred. Grandfather was the one who saw your potential. Speaking of seeing potential, Frank interjected, I heard something interesting about Derek Ellison yesterday. I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. He started a small nonprofit, Frank continued, teaching coding to disadvantaged youth. Apparently, his experience with us led to some soul-searching. Good for him, I said, genuinely. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even those who tried to steal yours? Ava asked skeptically. I considered this. Maybe especially them. If Derek has found a way to contribute positively, that's a win for everyone. Frank's eyes crinkled with approval. That's why you're the right person for this job, Madeline. You understand that success isn't about defeating others, it's about elevating everyone. Thomas appeared then, tablet in hand. He typed quickly. Maddie, Maya wants to show you something new for Echo. It helps people like me draw better. Lead the way, I said, excusing myself from Frank and Ava. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, demonstrations, and conversations about the future. Through it all, I maintained the calm, confident presence I had developed over the past year, a far cry from the nervous developer who had once sat silently at the end of a conference table. As the event wound down, Margaret Chen found me by the refreshment table. Quite a transformation, she observed, both for you and for Crescendo. It's been an incredible year, I agreed. You know, she said, thoughtfully, when Frank first suggested promoting you to CIO, some board members were skeptical. They thought you lacked experience. She smiled. No one is skeptical anymore. Later that night, after most guests had departed, I found myself alone in my new executive office. The view of Austin at night was breathtaking, the city lights spreading out like a constellation below. On my desk sat the model train Thomas had given me, now joined by several others, a small collection matching the one in Frank's office. Beside them was a framed photograph from today's ceremony. Frank, Thomas, Ava, and me, all smiling together. My computer pinged with a message from Thomas, sent through the Echo platform. Proud of you, Maddie. You're changing the world for people like me. I typed back. We're changing it together, Thomas. That's what makes it matter. As I prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Remember when you asked me why I did all this for you? Now you know. Some people are meant to carry visions forward. You're one of them. Sleep well, CIO Blake. I smiled, tucking the phone away as I took one last look at the city below. Somewhere out there, people were using Echo to express thoughts they'd never been able to share before. Children were connecting with parents. Patients were communicating with doctors. Barriers were falling, one word at a time, all because of a chance encounter in a hallway. In the silence of my office, I made a quiet promise to myself to never forget what it felt like to be powerless, to have my voice silenced, to face injustice. Alone. That memory would guide every decision I made as Chief Innovation Officer, ensuring that Crescendo's technology always served those who needed it most. Sometimes the smallest moments contain the greatest opportunities. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can change everything. And sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe has a way of bringing us exactly where we need to be.